Hey, everybody. It is Thursday, May 22nd. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to.
Moshe, you are officially 1 year older. How does it feel?
It's what you ask the kids, right? You're like, do you feel older
Do you
today
feel
than you did
older?
yesterday? Woke up with some back pain, worried about how much cake I should eat due to my cholesterol levels. Sounds about right for your early 40s, right?
Well, I hope you had a nice birthday.
It was a wonderful birthday with my favorite people, so I can't ask for more than that.
Well, that is good to hear. And the news somewhat cooperated. I know you were hoping for some big news and not
like the best
a
thing
horrible
ever,
event.
like the end of war. That's what I was hoping May 21st would bring us.
Maybe next year.
Yeah.
Instead, we've got some other headlines for you. Another heated exchange in the Oval Office with a foreign leader. This time, President Trump clashed with the president of South Africa. What happened? Plus, we are learning more about Joe Biden's prostate cancer diagnosis, when he had his last screening.
Yeah, especially as the questions stack up about whether his team is being honest about the timing of the diagnosis here. And beyond that, it comes as this new book out. The latest book is out. This is the Jake Tapper, Alex Thompson book about what took place inside the Biden administration, what they attempted to cover up here. And it's interesting, Jill, we'll play a clip from one of the more challenging interviews they had with Megyn Kelly, who was like, why did it take you guys so long to figure out this story?
The U.S. has officially accepted the souped-up Boeing plane from Qatar. What needs to happen before President Trump will be using it as Air Force One?
A long road ahead for the plane that he hopes will replace his Air Force One.
I feel like it's like Pimp My Ride. Remember that show?
It's Pimp That... Yes, I remember that
plane.
show. It's Pimp My Plane, but when it belongs to the president, now it's up to the U.S. military to take the whole thing apart, put the whole thing back together, and customize it to ensure it can actually, be the ride that Trump takes moving forward.
Meanwhile, the Senate passed the president's No Tax on Tips Act. Why some say it's not all good news for tipped workers. Overseas, what we're learning about Israel's plans to strike Iran if Trump's nuclear talks break down. Some huge tech news. OpenAI buys the AI device startup from Apple veteran Jony Ive.
Jony Ive, the famous guy who brought us the design of the iPhone, the MacBook, the iPad, some of the more famous items. So this new link up has a lot of people speculating as to what could happen next for ChatGPT.
In-N-Out removing red dye 40 from certain menu items. Moshe, if it feels like I've been putting a lot of In-N-Out in the podcast, I feel like you mentioned you love In-N-Out, so now anytime I see a story with In-N-Out, I include it.
And as both of us are on the East Coast, we try to look west, to ensure that we are covering issues that are of interest to our friends over on the West Coast of America.
And are you watching Instagram, talking to friends, streaming something on TV as you're listening to this podcast? Some new data on how our attention spans are shrinking and how to improve it.
What did you just say, Jill? That was a really long headline.
I zoned out.
I zoned out.
Plus, Moshe is on this day in history.
Your clue today. Whoa.
Whoa.
Jill knows the answer, everybody.
I wait every year for this. All right, another heated meeting in the Oval Office at the White House between President Trump and a foreign leader, this time South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Some are saying he got the Zelensky treatment while meeting with President Trump on Wednesday.
It was Zelensky light, Jill.
Did they have lunch?
He didn't boot him from the Oval Office. I will just say that.
In this case, President Trump alleged that there is a genocide taking place against white farmers in South Africa, and then he dramatically made his case as he had the lights turned down in the Oval Office and played videos that showed alleged evidence of the systemic murders of Afrikaners or white South Africans, primarily of French and Dutch descent. Trump had claimed that the white farmers in South Africa are victims of genocide, a charge that Ramaphosa, the country's courts, and even some white farmers say is not true. At the same time, there has been race-based violence directed at Afrikaners, including theft, physical violence, and in some cases murder. A number of white South Africans saying that they fear for their lives and have been looking to leave the country. This as South Africa continues to deal with the fallout from the apartheid system that existed for decades that gave the minority white population preferential treatment.
Yeah, apartheid ended in the early 90s, but South Africa is still dealing with the fallout 3 decades later. This has been an issue for Trump in particular because Elon Musk on his team is from South Africa. And so he has really been pushing this with President Trump. Trump has been posting some things on social media. So there was an expectation here that he would be confronting the South African leader, but definitely in a unique style, Jill, bringing down the lights of the Oval Office, saying, "I'm glad you brought that up." And this was in response to a question from the media in the Oval Office. And Trump had this presentation, this montage prepared. A spokesperson for Ramaphosa called the whole thing an ambush, saying the meeting's format changed. They weren't expecting anything of the sort. And in this montage that Trump played, he showed a number of extremist politicians and extremist activists in South Africa calling for white South Africans to lose their land, to suffer discrimination, saying revenge is necessary against the population, the minority white population there, given the decades that the black population was discriminated against. Now, Ramaphosa responded without really raising his voice in an aggressive way. That's why, it's not really a Zelensky-like confrontation. He did say to Trump there, "This does not show the full picture of my country. We are a multi-party democracy in South Africa. People can express themselves. Our government policy, as in Ramaphosa's government policy, is completely against what some of these politicians and others have been saying, and the extremes don't represent overall policy." Now, what he has said is listen, we have a problem in South Africa, but it is a crime problem. The country has the 5th highest crime rate in the world, 30,000 homicides as of 2023, the latest numbers there. About 50 of those 30,000 murders took place on farms, affecting farmers of all racial groups. This is according to Afrikaner group AfroForum. So effectively, Ramaphosa saying, listen, we have a widespread crime issue, but it's not specific to South Africans. There's criminality in the country, not only against white people. In fact, you're more likely to die as a black person in the country than as a white person in the country. Nonetheless, here, this is a huge issue for Trump. We told you last week that the administration has begun accepting white South Africans as refugees. Last week, accepting 59 of them. And it does come as Trump has tightened immigration policy and asylum and refugee status for other countries, but has made a point of allowing in white South Africans. Now, as you noted, Jill, they aren't experiencing genocide by any stretch of the imagination, and that's why you do see pushback even internally in South Africa, but they are facing increasing violence and discrimination from the post-apartheid government as they try to correct the wrongs or correct the ills of the past, because you have a very small population of white South Africans who still own about 75% of the land, farmland in the country. Racial tensions are deep-rooted. That apartheid system existed from 1948 to 1994. Numbers here, the white South African population is about now 7% of the country's population, but again, own nearly 3/4 of the land in the country. So many Afrikaners are closely involved in farming today, didn't play a role in apartheid, but their ancestors did. And so there has been a pushback in the country, including legislation that allows the government to take land without payment to try to correct unjust racial discrimination and create more equity in the country. And that's behind some of these allegations of genocide and the feeling that whites are now being discriminated against in the country as, again, the government tries to correct the wrongs of the past. This is sort of like a reparations style system that they have there. Again, Ramaphosa pushed back on various allegations there. Jill, we posted a couple clips of the confrontation over our Instagram page, and no shortage of comments, hundreds and hundreds of comments as people debate that issue. And so this issue not going away anytime soon, especially with Elon's very close relationship with Trump.
Okay, now to the latest with Joe Biden and his recent cancer diagnosis. Amid questions about his cancer announcement and questions about whether he hid it from the public, a spokesperson for Biden's office announced Tuesday that his last known screening for prostate cancer was in 2014. That is 11 years ago, when he was 71 years old and serving as vice president. So he went just over a decade without a screening. And it begs the question, is this normal? Experts actually say that it is not unusual for men over 70 to stop having regular prostate-specific antigen tests, or PSAs. So that is the standard screening to determine the risk of prostate cancer. And the reason for that, according to CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta, only about 25% of people who get an abnormal reading on that PSA test actually have cancer, which means about 75% of men who get an abnormal reading and then go through all of the additional testing are actually fine, which is why a number of doctors do not give their patients who are over the age of 70 a screening so they don't have to deal with the false positives. The U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, which issues guidelines on preventative procedures, actually recommends against PSA screening in men over 70. Prostate cancer is usually slow-moving, which makes the tests unnecessary for older men. Biden's spokesperson had said he received the disease diagnosis on Friday as he was being examined, quote, after experiencing increasing urinary symptoms. His doctors say it's pretty advanced, though, and has spread to his bones. So as we've been reporting, other physicians, not necessarily Joe Biden's, say that that means that he has probably had this cancer for years, including when he was serving as president. And it sparked a lot of questions from Republicans and even Democrats wondering whether Biden and his team knew that he actually had cancer last year before he ended his reelection bid. So far, Moshe, there is no evidence of that.
Right. No explicit evidence, at least not yet, but it does come amid these questions about a cover-up, about his cognitive conditions. So there's a lot of people out there, Jill, even some Democrats and independents in the Mo News committee who've reached out saying, I don't know if I can trust the Biden world anymore in light of what has happened over the last couple of years.
That's right. His cancer diagnosis has been wrapped up in this separate debate about whether he should have ever sought re-election last year at all and what people around him knew about his physical and cognitive health. It is a topic that has been in the news with the publication of a book by journalists Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson. It's called Original Sin: President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again.
Yeah, just the latest book here is getting a lot of attention this week as it came out. It was officially published on Tuesday. The book claims that the Biden inner circle, including his family, his top aides, orchestrated a very comprehensive effort to obscure the president's deteriorating condition, not only from the public, not just from the media, but also from donors and even members of his own cabinet. They did more than 200 interviews for the book, so they've been making a bunch of media rounds. We're going to play a couple clips here from the interviews that Tapper and Thompson have been doing, because it's interesting how they're being approached, especially in light of the fact that they were journalists who covered the Biden White House. So there's accusations from some, especially on the right, being like, where have you guys been all this time? But first, here is a clip right now of Tapper talking to Katie Couric, who has a podcast and her own newsletter these days. And here he's talking about Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, and what he learned, what Tapper has learned about Hunter really effectively calling the shots for his dad towards the end of the presidency.
How big a factor was the Hunter stuff?
I think it was considerable. I think Hunter was driving the decision making for the family in a way that he was almost like a chief of staff of the family.
Does that strike you as pretty bizarre?
It's bizarre because I think he is provably, demonstrably unethical, sleazy, and prone to horrible decisions. I mean,
tell me how you really feel.
Well, I mean, I just look at the record. I mean, after his brother died, he cheated on his wife with his brother's widow and then got her addicted to crack. That's just one thing I could say.
All right. So that was that element of it. Another clip here, or interview, I should say, that's getting a lot of attention. Tapper and Thompson went on Megyn Kelly. Now, Megyn Kelly, former Fox News anchor, she now has her own podcast. She's a Trump supporter explicitly, like endorsed him during the campaign, spoke at his campaign rallies. And so it's interesting here, she was loaded for bear for this interview, really pressing Jake on why he and other members of the mainstream media did not press harder about Biden's cognitive decline while he was running for re-election, still in office. She's saying, like, listen, I'm a conservative. I had no sources in this administration. You did, and you neglected to push it. But now, finally, you're telling the story. Where have you been all along, especially as right-wing media saw what was happening to Biden, was calling it out, and you guys were calling it misinformation? Here is a bit of Tapper with Megyn Kelly.
Over here in my ecosphere, we were covering all of these. It wasn't just falling down. It was getting lost. It was some of the stuff you report in your book, we knew and we were reporting on, like the multi-jump cuts in the videos of him, where it was obvious he couldn't get through a 1-minute take. It was clear to us that he was using teleprompter, and there was some reporting on that at the time, all of which the White House was denying. Now, the current White House, I have some connections. With the Joe Biden White House, I had none. But you did. There was an attempted cover-up. It could only ever work if you allowed it, if the press allowed it. Some of us tried not to, and some of us were complicit.
The Biden White House did not like me. Okay, I do not have great connections with the Biden White House.
Well, clearly you have a lot of sources. You say you talked to over 200 sources for this book. So you have some you could have called and worked.
No, that's the point, is that they were not being honest.
So Megyn continued to press him, Jill. It's a fascinating conversation. And Tapper admits, he's like, listen, conservatives were right on this. He actually says in the interview with Megyn Kelly that he has since apologized to Lara Trump, the daughter-in-law of Donald Trump, because he had really pushed back on her hard when she was making accusations against Biden and his cognitive decline. And remember, there was a time, Jill, back in 2020 when the line was, well, Biden has a stutter. Biden has a stutter. Biden has a stutter. But people on the right were like, yeah, it's not just the stutter, though. Like, there is an issue here. And so that was the nature of the back and forth between Tapper and Lara Trump. Tapper now admitting, no, Lara Trump was right. It was more than a stutter. And so he does say now that he looks back on his coverage with humility. He wishes he had covered the issues of age and mental acuity more. Knowing what he knows now, he should have pushed harder. Jill, one other aspect of the Megyn interview I found interesting is she asked him what it was like for him when he was moderating that debate between Biden and Trump, sitting there next to Dana Bash, like realizing what was going on. And interesting observation there from Tapper is like afterwards, Biden came up to me to like shake my hand and was being like, "Can you believe how much Trump lies?" And Dana and I were looking at each other like, was this guy just at this debate? Like, does he actually know what just took place? Like, that he just gave the worst performance in American debate history? And so he was saying, fascinating, that like Biden was completely oblivious to his own performance there in the aftermath of, at least in those first few minutes after the debate ended.
I found the entire interview to be fascinating. And just back to the Katie Couric interview, I didn't realize how much sway Hunter Biden had in the White House. I feel like the reporting was always that Jill Biden was kind of calling the shots, not necessarily Hunter. And we know we had seen him in and out of the White House a lot, especially toward the end of Biden's first term.
Yeah, he was making sure Dad gave him a pardon for, he didn't want to have to go to prison. So he was like, Dad, I'm here. But I mean, Jill, it was remarkable. Like at some point, Hunter was walking with him to Marine One. Hunter was with him in the Oval Office, like was in like meetings that had like nothing to do with him. And so, there was this sense that he was just letting Hunter in on everything. And there's questions as to like, given where the president was, like what decisions at the end or in that last year were really pushed by Hunter and by Jill. And one of them, by the way, was running for re-election. I mean, they were the ones even after the debate, Jill, as in Jill Wagner, not Jill Biden, that were telling President Biden, you can stick it out. You can stick it out. You can survive this. And so that was upsetting senior Democrats, being like, can somebody get the family out of the room and like, so we can speak rationally to the president of the United States? And, because ultimately power is addicting, and it is very cool to have your father and very beneficial to have your father or your husband be the president of the United States. And so that is where, the line got crossed there. But some fascinating perspective now that more and more people are willing to be honest about what they saw inside that White House now that he's out of power.
It's also cool to be working for the president of the United States, which is why there's not much incentive for the people who were closest to Biden to come out and say, look, this guy just doesn't have it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, listen, when you work for him, like most of those people were not Kamala loyalists. So ultimately, like he was their meal ticket, whether you're a senior aide to Biden or you're a family member of Biden. And so it creates, you can see how this effect that it creates, that the people around the president, and by the way, it's not just Biden, it's Trump, it's any president of the United States, the people around them, he is their meal ticket. And so ultimately they are incentivized to keep this person in power for as long as humanly possible, even if it starts to lead to a weekend at Bernie's situation.
Time for the speed read. Moshe, quick budget update from Politico. At least as we're recording this podcast on Wednesday evening, it does not look like House Republicans have enough votes yet to pass Trump's, quote, big, beautiful bill. Of course, you never know. There were meetings all day on Wednesday, but apparently still a few holdouts.
Yeah, Congress is known, if they think they have the votes, to hold a late night or overnight vote. So we could be waking up to headlines, but as of now, still a lot of back and forth here as Speaker Johnson tries to appease both his moderates and the folk to his right. Jill, this is the mega $4 trillion bill that extends the tax cuts, has a number of other tax cuts in it, but potentially pay for it or partially pay for it, cuts Medicaid, food stamps, and some other programs. And in the House, the Democrats basically have no power, and it's just become a debate among Republicans, those on the right who want even more cuts, and those in the moderate wing in blue states who want to see specific things that are good for them that those on the right don't want to see. So Speaker Johnson really trying to literally count every single vote. He has 3 votes to spare, so he can see 3 no votes, but it still looks like he's still at about a handful of folks he's trying to ensure he can appease to get this thing across the finish line.
Meanwhile, from the Washington Post, over in the Senate, lawmakers passed a bill to eliminate the federal income tax on cash tips late Tuesday. That is something that picked up some political traction during President Trump's presidential campaign. The Senate vote was unanimous. Democrats and Republicans completely agree on this. They praised the speedy passage of the bill. They framed it as an example of successful bipartisanship. The legislation now heads to the House. So, Moshe, what is in this bill? The No Tax on Tips Act proposes amending the IRS code to exempt cash tips, which includes tips given by cash, credit, and debit card and check from federal income tax. Eligible employees will be allowed to claim a 100% deduction in their tax filings for amounts up to $25,000 per tax year. The Treasury Secretary would publish a list of eligible occupations no later than 90 days after the measures enacted. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer saying that waiters, bartenders, delivery drivers, those are examples of the type of employees who could become eligible for the tax exemption. Only employees, though, who are compensated less than $160,000 in the 2024-2025 tax year would be eligible for the exemption, and they would have to report their tips to their employers for the purpose of withholding payroll taxes, according to the legislation.
So this is something that Trump announced during the campaign trail. In particular, he was trying to win the votes in Vegas, where a lot of people survive on tips, as he tried to get Nevada to vote for him. Funny enough, a couple weeks later, Kamala Harris came out in favor of the legislation as well. And he's like, you're copying me. This was my idea. Well, nonetheless, this idea has become super popular here, hence the unanimous vote in the Senate. Republican Ted Cruz, who introduced the bill a while ago, said in a statement this will have a lasting impact on Americans who live paycheck to paycheck. Now, this will cost the government about $10 to $15 billion a year in estimated tax revenue, but tipped workers do not make up a large share of the labor force. They tend to be much younger than non-tipped workers. Many of them already have very low federal income tax liability. Now, at the same time, some economists say that this policy might actually end up hurting low-income tipped workers by making some ineligible for the earned income tax credit, or by reducing their ability to get credit towards Social Security benefits from the tips. And then there are some folks, Jill, who say this only reinforces the fact that in many cases in some industries that you earn a living wage solely based on tips as opposed to the salary you get from employers. So some say that this only really reinforces kind of tip culture. And so that is one of the arguments against this. Nonetheless, a lot of people who earn their incomes off of tips definitely celebrating based on that Senate vote. Now, of course, that goes to the House. They have had this provision in part as part of that larger tax bill. And so they might carve that out now and pass that separately. It would make that mega $4 trillion bill cost $15 billion less.
From the New York Times, the latest on the Qatari plane we've been talking about for the last week. The U.S. has now officially accepted a 747 jetliner as a gift from the government of Qatar. And the Air Force has been asked to figure out a way to quickly upgrade it so that it could be put into use as a new Air Force One for President Trump. The Pentagon spokesperson saying the Secretary of Defense has accepted a Boeing 747 from Qatar in accordance with all federal rules and regulations. The Department of Defense will work to ensure proper security measures and functional mission requirements are considered for an aircraft used to transport the President of the United States. Industry executives estimate that the plane's worth about $200 million. Pentagon officials acknowledge it's going to require extensive work before it could be considered secure enough to carry President Trump. The Pentagon hasn't given an estimate of when the work on that plane might be done, even though Trump and the White House have made it clear that the president wants it soon, perhaps even by the end of the year. So that would give them about 6 to 7 months.
Yeah, he wants his plane and he wants it now, Jill. He's riding on an early 90s plane that first carried Bush 41, Bush the father. And there has been a project over at Boeing to build a new Air Force One. It has been funded to the tune of $4 billion. It was supposed to be ready last year, Jill, but it's not. And it might not be ready till 2029. And so Trump says, I want a new plane. The Qataris, incidentally, have been trying to sell this plane. It hasn't sold. And so they gave it to us as a gift. In fact, they gave one as a gift to the president of Turkey, Erdogan. This is the other plane. They tried to sell it. They couldn't sell it. They said, hey, America, you want this gift? And so they've given us the plane. Now, the Pentagon has to do a lot of things. First, they got to take apart the entire thing and make sure there's no bugs on it, make sure it's secure. Beyond that, they have to customize it. They have to make sure it can do mid-air refueling. They have to make sure it can handle like a nuclear blast that happens nearby. They need to have anti-missile technology and a variety of things. Some of the things we don't even know that exist on Air Force One, classified things that protect the president, that handle his communications, that ensure secure communications, all the various things. It's one of the reasons why Boeing is taking so long on the actual planes they're supposed to be building right now. And this has been hugely controversial. And remember, this could be hundreds of millions. This could be up to $1 billion to customize this plane, the Qatari plane we got for free, to have it ready for President Trump. Now, of course, who's going to pay for that? Well, Congress is going to have to allocate funds for that. So that's going to go through Congress. And you've had Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill who are like, we don't think this is such a good idea, taking the plane for a variety of reasons. From Qatar, John Kennedy, the senator, Republican senator from Louisiana, who's known for his various off-the-cuff remarks. Joe said last week that he trusts Qatar as much as a rest stop bathroom. And I think he said something like, trust in God, but tie up your camel was his line about the Qataris, for what it's worth.
Moshe, I did play that soundbite. It was one of the days that you were off. And I made sure to include that as it was my only pseudo interaction of the podcast.
So yes, playing sound from John Kennedy he feels like a co-host in the way that he talks. And so ultimately here you have 2 new planes being built by Boeing. They're delayed. Now Boeing's like, I think we can get them ready by 2027, but it's probably going to be 2029. Of course, for Trump, that means he'll be out of office and he's going to have to use this 90s plane for 3 more years, and he doesn't love it. So in the meantime, he's going to have this Qatari plane. The question about this Qatari plane is the plan still for it to go to the presidential library of Donald Trump? That was the deal here initially, which is like, I'll take the plane, I'll customize it, taxpayers will pay for customization, and then at the end of my presidency, the new president will have the brand new plans from Boeing. I will take the plane with me and put it in my new library, presidential library, which I imagine will go down in Florida. So still a lot of questions here from Congress on this plane, but nonetheless, they've given it to us, Jill. So we got to go take a ride on it at some point.
They've given it to us and we've taken it. That's the headline also.
Yes, exactly.
To the Middle East from Axios, Israel making preparations to swiftly strike Iran's nuclear facilities if negotiations between the U.S. and Iran collapse. Axios is reporting that the Israeli intelligence community has shifted just in the past few days from believing that a nuclear deal was close to thinking that talks could soon break down. One source saying that the Israeli military thinks its operational window to conduct a successful strike could close soon, so they'll have to move fast if the talks do fail. The 5th round of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks are scheduled to take place Friday in Rome. White House envoy Steve Witkoff gave his Iranian counterpart a written proposal for a deal during the last round, which was 10 days ago. The negotiations have hit a bit of a roadblock over the question of whether Iran would be able to have any domestic enrichment capability.
So one big question here is, would the Israelis even wait for an American approval or green light here? Also keep in mind that the Israelis, the sense always was that if they needed to strike Iranian nuclear capability, they would do so alongside the Americans, who have aircraft carriers, who have bombs that can go much deeper underground. Remember, the majority of the Iranian program is deep, deep underground, because they know what has happened in the past. The Israelis took out the Iraqi nuclear program in the 80s, the Syrian nuclear program in the early 2000s because they were mostly built above ground. So the Iranians learned their lesson, saying, if we're going to build it in this neighborhood, we're going to build our nuclear program very, very deep, which means the Israelis would need American support here. So that'll be one of the big questions is how much damage can they really do to the program given the capabilities they would want from the Americans? One question I had, Joe, as I saw this headline is, do the Americans sort of want this headline out here? Because this sort of puts extra pressure on the Iranians to agree to a deal. So remember that like the way that leaks work to the media is there's a whole bunch of strategy and triangulation that you play here. And as these negotiations have taken place here, and they've sort of hit a wall because the Iranians still want to preserve their ability to do uranium enrichment to a certain level, not to a military level, to a civilian level. And that's been a non-starter for America for a very long time, at least for the Trump administration. Is this sort of like, hey, but the Israelis might bomb you? Is that going to work here or be effective in the negotiations? We shall see. And remember, the reason why the Israelis are so concerned about this, for them, this is life or death. You know, the Iranians chant death to Israel and have said, you know, they would happily eliminate the country of Israel and destroy the entire thing, given how small Israel is, about the size of New Jersey. For them, an Iranian regime that has nuclear weapons is a non-starter.
Moshe, I thought the same thing about this leak. Is it just kind of a part of the bigger strategy to get concessions from Iran? We shall see.
Like, you better agree to this deal because that Bibi, we can't control him right now, Iran.
All right, now to some big tech and business news from Bloomberg. OpenAI will be acquiring the AI device startup that's co-founded by Apple vet Jony Ive in a nearly $6.5 billion all-stock deal. Joining forces with this legendary designer making a big push into hardware. This is the largest purchase in OpenAI's history. It will provide the company with a dedicated unit for developing AI-powered devices. Acquiring the secretive startup named IO also will secure the services of Ive and other former Apple designers who were behind iconic products like the iPhone. I've said in a statement, I have a growing sense that everything I've learned over the last 30 years has led me to this place and to this moment.
So Jony Ive is this very famous British-born designer who teamed up with Steve Jobs. They were partners for years. So when you look at your iPhone, your MacBook, your Apple Watch, your iPad, previously your iPod, the design, the curvature, the look, this was all Jony Ive's vision. And even the Apple stores themselves. Now, I've left Apple back in 2019, and given how explosive the growth has been for OpenAI, ChatGPT, them looking at actual devices here, especially with Ive's eye for detail, is going to be fascinating to watch. So this was certainly a hot topic in the business world over the last day as this headline came out. And so Sam Altman, who runs OpenAI, developed OpenAI, very much viewed as a visionary. Jony Ive, the visionary. We'll see what these two have in store.
From USA Today, California fast food staple In-N-Out announcing changes to some of its menu items, notably removing the food dye Red 40 from its pink lemonade. The burger chain says it's replaced Red Dye 40 with beta-carotene and vegetable juice in its strawberry shakes and its signature pink lemonade. The company owner says, we strive to have the best and be the best in all areas. It has been my family's priority since 1948 and remains my priority to this very day.
Remember, California moved first here. Now the feds are moving this direction, especially with RFK Jr. in charge over at the Health and Human Services Department. And this is sort of the hope HHS had in their announcement, since they didn't announce like a law requiring these companies to do it, but it was more of a hint, suggestion. Can you guys start removing red dye from your products, or we're going to have to come after you at some point? So here you have an example of In-N-Out at least saying, we're going to go ahead and do this. And it is an added expense, but ultimately they can achieve the same look with natural ingredients like beta-carotene and vegetable juice as opposed to the chemical.
From ABC News, feel like you cannot focus, like you'll never finish a book again, like the only way to keep your mind and hands busy is to scroll on social media for hours? Well, one body of decades-long research found that the average person's attention span for a single screen is 47 seconds. That's down from 2.5 minutes in 2004. Experts say the 24/7 news cycle, uncertainty about the state of the world, and countless hours of screen time don't help. The good news is that you can actually change these behaviors and improve your attention span. So, more on that in a little bit. Interestingly, shifting attention is actually an evolutionary feature. It's not a bug. Our brains are hardwired to quickly filter information and then hone in on potential threats or changes in what's happening around us. But what's grabbing our attention has changed. For our ancestors, it could have been a rustle in the bushes putting us on guard for a lurking tiger, for example. Today, it could just be some pings of breaking news alerts and phone notifications. Not quite as dangerous.
Well, dangerous in a different way.
The pandemic as well warped many people's sense of time and increased their screen usage like never before.
So potential positive spin there, but ultimately, Jill, I think, pretty drastic, right? That back in 2004, just about 20 years ago, 2.5 minutes. So what is that? 150 seconds of attention span. Now we're down to 47 seconds. So we've lost about 2/3 of our ability to concentrate over the course of the last 20 years, but significant 20 years, right? Because it's smartphones, it's apps. None of those things existed back in 2004 for the majority of us. And there is something to be said about the ability to comprehend things, the ability to read books, and concentrate on things for more than 47 seconds. At the same time, we'll leave you with this, some recommendations to improve your attention span. One idea here, Jill, is you challenge yourself to set a 2.5-minute timer and stay on the article without looking at another device or clicking away for 2.5 minutes. That's one way to test yourself. They say that active breaks are also among the best ways to retrain your mind and your attention span. They only take about 30 minutes. It can be as simple as taking a walk while noticing things around you or moving to another room for lunch away from devices. You can get creative, crafts, meditation, cooking a meal, again, with no devices. And again, going outside, experiencing nature. When the brain is understimulated and looking for change, it'll usually grab onto the first thing it sees. And so the smartphone, these devices are ever producing change machines. So they're very enticing. So basically, not complicated stuff here. Get your device away from yourself and go experience something for a bit of time without the internets.
Yeah, I don't think we're breaking news here. I think it's kind of obvious, but it's a good reminder.
It's a good reminder to go curl up and read a good book. All right, Jill, on this day in history, on this May 22nd, we begin in the year 337. So that was a while back, about 1700 years ago. Reportedly, on this date, May 22nd, 337, today was the date the Roman Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity. He was on his deathbed. He was actually the first emperor to adhere to Christianity, but he issued an edict that protected Christians in the empire and then officially converted Christianity on this day in 337. He is buried where else? Constantinople, Constantine, now known as Istanbul, of course. And before him, Christians, along with Jews, were persecuted by the Roman Empire. Just about 40 years after his death, Christianity would be the official religion of the Roman Empire. Fast forward to the 20th century. On this day in 1906, the Wright brothers flying machine received a patent. They'd been experimenting with unmanned flying machines for a couple of years, and then manned flying in 1900 when they began to test their gliders. But like many things that come up, they had legal issues because their claim for a patent led to a lot of litigation. Other people saying, well, no, that's our idea. And so it delayed development for a while until the government stepped in and really helped to develop the aviation industry. On this day in 1972, Richard Nixon visits Moscow, the first visit by a U.S. president to the Soviet Union. I think Donald Trump, as we look at his second term here, Jill, is very much looking to be one of the more influential presidents when it comes to foreign policy, going back to that second Nixon term, going back to Reagan. Very much second terms is when presidents look to foreign policy, look to shape their legacy in that way. All right, a bit of pop culture news before we go here. On this day in 1980, Pac-Man was released. So Pac-Man turning 45 years old today. 32 years ago today, the series finale for Saved by the Bell aired on NBC. And the NBC show that we teased at the beginning of this podcast, Jill, give us one more old college try.
Whoa.
There she has it, everyone. If you don't know the answer by now, on this day 30 years ago, the series finale of Blossom aired on NBC. Of course, Jill doing her best impression of Joey.
I like to think I've nailed it, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
No, I think Joey Lawrence as Joey Russo very much would appreciate your impression.
Whoa.
For those keeping track, Joey Lawrence. He's about to be 50 years old, Jill. Can we still call him Joey, or is he Joe at this point, or Joseph?
I can't call him Joseph. Like, he's just Joey.
He's Joey. Yeah, I agree. Even there's only a handful of like people like after the age of 40 you can call Joey. He's one of them.
But Moshe, we're still calling you Moshe, right? You have no other names after this recent birthday?
It's funny. Olivia, who's now 20 months old, has heard Alex now call me Moshe enough around the apartment that this week she has taken to saying Moshe. It's like she's like walking around the apartment saying, like, she's not calling me because she calls me Abba, which is dad in Hebrew, typically, and now she's just like Moshe. I'm like, oh my God, now I got two of you calling me Moshe around the apartment.
That gets funny though. I can't help but laughing. You don't want your kids to call you their first names, but whenever my kids do, when they're like Jill, Michael, you can't help but laugh.
No,
which encourages them to do
she's
it.
A toddler. She's 20 months old, and she's like yelling my name around the apartment. It's hilarious.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Mo News Podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It helps us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store. Those reviews really do help. We appreciate them.
Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News Podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.